Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the final session of the RU Online Learning Conference. This is From Equipment to Engagement, Best Practices, Considerations for Lecture Capture. And just by that, my friend Dave and I are going to offer just a few tips, tricks, and strategies to help you with the creative process of coming up with a lecture capture uh, and turning that into some sort of content, whether that be video or audio content, and some just ways to do that. And so you might be wondering who we are if you don't know us already. I am a nonlinear editing and media specialist. I work with faculty over at the New Media Center on Livingston, just helping people or helping the faculty kind of just achieve anything that they'd like to in terms of online teaching. Generally, a non-linear editing specialist in this instance just means that I get asked what that means a lot. It just means that you're splicing things. You can start at the end of a video and work back to the beginning. You can make things in segments. You can do all sorts of different styles of editing that aren't just working from the front to the end of it, and that's what non-linear means. Yeah, and Dave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Those of you that I might not met before, my name is Dave Ubelauer. I'm an instructional designer with Rutgers Teaching and Learning and Technology. When I'm not working with faculty in course development and providing them with pedagogical advice, I'm also an instructor in our online teaching certificate program where I teach an academic video production course. One or two of my students are actually attending today, which I'm really happy to see. I can assure you that I'm the same person, or the same person that you actually see in that picture on the screen is actually me. That was just pre-pandemic unbearded Dave. But here I am now with a nice full beard. So welcome, and Walker and I really look forward to today's discussion with you all.
Yeah, my little bit of stubble is jealous of that full beard right there. Absolutely.
This
All
took a
right.
long
Yeah, exactly. I don't have the patience. All right, so today's learning objectives. Like I said before, generally, we're going to develop a pre-production plan, select some appropriate tools to help you record your lecture capture. We're going to go all the way from the front end to the back end of this process. We're going to maximize your recording environment to establish effective on-screen presence. We're going to discuss ways to create creative, engaging academic video content, and then we're also going to identify common accessibility considerations for lecture capture in order to make videos accessible to all learners. That's just a general overview. So part one, let's start at the beginning. What do you do before you start recording a lecture? Generally, there are two styles of academic videos. There are talking head videos, which seek to mimic a sort of traditional lecture style. These videos, just the good part about them is that they have some sort of social connection between you and whomever you're teaching. They sort of mimic a sort of traditional face-to-face lecture, but instead of being a social endeavor like a in-person lecture is, they're sort of parasocial. You're trying to put forth a social face to your student body who actually you're not interacting with in person. You've probably seen these styles of videos on CNN or MSNBC. Screen capture videos are just more generally suited towards demonstrations, guided walkthroughs, step-by-step instructions, things that just need a lot of explication. On the right-hand side of the screen, I've chosen to show just a PowerPoint presentation, but there are other kinds of screen capture video. These two videos do not exist in a vacuum. They're not mutually exclusive to one another. There are also hybrids of the two. On the left-hand side here, we have a slightly more complicated edit. We have our speaker. He's sitting in front of a green screen. This is edited out of the background, and there we have some graphics that explicate further what he is talking about, which appear in sync with when he says them behind him. On the right-hand side here, we have sort of something, if you guys have been watching other presentations, this is the template that we've been using for the RU Online conference for some of our pre-recorded pieces of content. And this style of presentation is a very easy edit. It's just a couple layers. And this is a very achievable thing. If you like the look of this and you're in the market for making video content, this is very easy and very professional looking. Some non-PowerPoint examples of screen capture. I've chosen to highlight here a Khan Academy style video. This kind of video is made with a Wacom tablet. That's a drawing tablet so that you can have fine motor control over your mouse, unlike me trying to write something using the mouse, which will come out looking kind of weird. Something that will just look bizarre. If you want fine motor control, you'll want a specialized piece of equipment for that. And on the right-hand side, this is a 3D modeling program. Obviously, having a face in the lower right-hand corner for a video like this would prove counterproductive to the point of a video like this. Just driving home the point that there are different considerations that you will need to make before you jump into developing even a storyboard for your eventual outcome of a video or a product that you're making. Storyboarding is a very similar process to outlining for like an essay or any sort of article, any piece of writing. This is a process you've definitely gone through. I have a sort of piece of meta-analysis here. This is what a storyboard would look like for this exact presentation. There are generally two disparate parts. There's a script, and then there's a description of what would appear on screen. So on screen right now, there's a talking head. That's me. Up at the top, there's a PowerPoint showing an example of a storyboard, and that's exactly what is appearing on screen. This is really, there's no strict style for this. It's just exactly what you want to do or what you think will make you have a more successful time and an easier part when you're doing the recording of the video. So I'm going to move on to some equipment considerations. So part 2, equipment considerations. So generally, cell phones are good, but webcams are better. And the reason why I'm going to say this is because cell phones, most of the time, you're going to run into two issues while you're trying to record video with them. You're going to run out of storage, and you're also going to run out, and it's hard to just orient them in such a way that it looks professional. Whereas with the webcam, they're actually built into kind of an eye-level position on most modern laptops. Some of them have them on the bottom of the screen, but on most laptops, it's in a very good position. You don't need to buy any sort of external equipment. And generally, actually, the quality of most modern webcams is surprisingly good. It's at least good enough as to not be distracting to your audience. And that's really the key point of all sorts of academic content. Standalone cameras obviously have the best quality. If you're making a professional video, you'll probably want to invest in a standalone camera, but they're really expensive, and also I think your money is better spent elsewhere. And here are some suggestions for where to spend your money. On a microphone, because surprisingly and sort of counterintuitively, if you're making a video, the most important thing about that video is not the way it looks for an academic context. It's about the way it sounds, because that's where most of the meaning is conveyed. If you can see me right now on this webcam and it was just me talking, you actually wouldn't lose all that much information because you can still hear very clearly what I'm saying. But with all of these microphone options, this is a great way to increase your production value. I'm sure you've all watched a video where you can't really understand what's being said. The audio is a little bit too muffled. There's like a lot of artifacts, a lot of noise, and that presents much more of a problem than if the video is just a little bit choppy. Actually, right now, sitting on my desk, I have a Yeti microphone, but I'm using a different one just because I have a nice mount for it. But yeah, I suggest if you want to spend $50 to $100 on a piece of equipment, buy any of these mics. My coworker Ariel, I think, uses the CAD USB mic. He's very happy with it. The Snowball USB mic I've used in several different contexts, and the Yeti. These are both made by the same company, and they're both worthwhile investments. So if you want to spend your money somewhere, do it on a mic, not a camera, at least from my point of view. So here are some options for recording your screen, which is an integral part of doing the screen capture style video. Kaltura Personal Capture is a free program to Rutgers faculty. That's what we use here at Rutgers. It has the functionality to record both your webcam and your screen at the same time, and it will generate a file which has them playing synchronously, which is an incredibly useful tool. Uh, Open broadcasting software is free to everyone, and it is an incredibly versatile piece of software. You can record pretty much anything using OBS. Camtasia is neat because it has the functionality of Kaltura Personal Capture or OBS, but it has a built-in. Oh, well, I think I'm getting audio
We
from
lock
somebody.
the microphones because it sounds like we might be getting someone else.
Yeah, all right, sure.
Excuse us for 1 second, everybody.
I got it. There we go.
I didn't do it. I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, I did not.
It's going to take a second.
But then she'll probably say, I want it. Like that.
Still hear it.
It's all good.
Right.
Generally, I'm just going to keep going. I'm sure you guys can probably hear me. Camtasia is really neat because it has the same functionality as Kaltura Personal Capture or OBS, but it actually has a built-in feature that you can do non-linear editing in the exact same program that you record into. I know, Dave, you use this program quite a lot. There's a free trial. So it's a little bit expensive. I think it's like in the realm of $150 for this program, which is, kind of a bit of money. But there's a free trial. So if you're at all curious, I highly recommend it. Some best options for nonlinear editing. Premiere Pro is obviously one of the industry standards. Shotcut and DaVinci Resolve, however, are both free alternatives with close to the exact same functionality of them. Once again, you can just Google both of these things. They're both free. The only limiting factor is that your computer has to be pretty good in order to be able to run them. But they're highly useful pieces of software. And these, once again, have timelines where you can orient all your footage. You can import your stuff. You can add effects to them. They're really useful. You can layer stuff and do picture-in-picture. You can do that all in Camtasia as well. So these are really, if you're curious about these things, I think that Shotcut and DaVinci Resolve, those were the two programs that I downloaded when I didn't have a budget for making videos. Part 3 is your recording environment. Just a few very simple tips. Lighting in your recording environment, you see, your camera is going to auto-adjust its exposure for the brightest thing in the frame. So this guy obviously is sitting in a skyscraper and he has a full glass window behind him. The camera's like, oh, I have to adjust because we're outside. We want to be able to see what's outside. But in reality, the subject, him, in this frame, which is taking up the central third of the screen, is completely underexposed. Whereas this guy is just in kind of a dark room and he's illuminated himself with what looks like a desk lamp. And this video just generally looks a little bit more professional and a little bit less distracting for whomever is watching it because they want to be able to see your face.
A good example of poor lighting is actually how my camera looks right now. I'm actually sitting near a window, so you can see the difference between Walker and myself. So there you
Yeah,
go.
you'll want to limit light going in from the background of whatever frame you're trying to set up. Checking your audio levels, you'll notice these are waveform monitors. These are pretty common features in all of those programs that I just talked about in Camtasia and all the non-linear editing pieces of software. But these are taken from a program called Audacity, which is another free program if you're interested in checking that out. As you can see, this one up here is recording way too loud. You can tell that because these are being cut off. So you're going to lose all the range from that level, and it's just going to be replaced with static. If you've ever heard an electric guitar solo, that's exactly what it's going to sound like, but it's going to be a distorted electric guitar solo in like a rock song. It's exactly the same effect, but it's just to your voice, and you lose a bunch of quality, which is not ideal for in educational context because it's going to be a little bit distracting. On the bottom here, this is just a little bit too low. When you turn this up to the proper volume, you'll get a lot of ambient background room noise that just sounds kind of weird, a lot of weird artifacts from your audio. And this is just the proper level. A little bit of peaking here, but that's something that you don't have to worry about. This is what you want to aim for if you're doing any sort of audio recording of your voice. And generally, the rule of thirds is something in cinematography where you try and orient yourself along the in thirds in the frame. Right now, this is kind of a rule of thirds to the left, rule of thirds to the center, rule of thirds to the right. This is further explicated by these frames. She's in the center, he's on the left. This is something to keep in mind just because this is a aesthetically appealing thing to the human eye for reasons which I'm not psychologically qualified to talk about, but for some reason this is what people like. Part 4, I'm going to pass it off to Dave.
All right. Thank you very much, Walker.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Now that we've discussed the technical and stylistic choices that you want to make before you create your lecture capture, we should also be sure to always consider our learners. And what this really means is looking at the big picture of how diverse that our learners can be. One of the most important considerations is to avoid overloading your lecture capture by packing in too much information, as this can really lead to what is more popularly known as cognitive load. Maybe not too popular all of you, but popular in the literature. Cognitive load basically means that our brains can only take in and process a certain amount of auditory and visual information at the same time. If we overload our learners' brains with too much content, then we risk losing our audience. And this is something that you're going to want to avoid when creating lecture captures, especially if you're recording a screencast where it's easy to put far too much information on the screen, as we'll see here in a bit in the next slide. All in all, though, you want to make sure that the auditory and visual information are in sync and that you're not making your students do extra work trying to figure out the content presented within the video. So here's an example of poor on-screen organization. As you can see on this screen, there's entirely way too much going on at the same time. Most of us have probably seen presentations like this at one point or another where your eyes just don't know where to go first and you quickly get lost in hearing what the speaker is trying to say as your brain is focused on all the activity actually going on the screen. Instead, consider breaking all of your content down into multiple slides. This way, the information being presented and the accompanied images are both always in sync. And that leads us into chunking and timing. And the concept of chunking really means breaking down your content into more manageable or digestible pieces. Try to choose 1 or 2 key points to discuss during each lecture capture. Keep each video to a maximum of about 10 minutes, though ideally around 6 to 7 minutes, as studies have shown this to be the ideal time frame in which your learners are most engaged for. If your topic does go much further than past 10 minutes, consider breaking that content down into multiple videos at logical breakup points. This way your learners can start the next section when they're ready, focused, and engaged. Speaking of learner engagement, let's discuss some useful strategies for that. First off, it's easiest to be yourself when you're in front of the camera. Plus, your learners will appreciate really getting to know the real you that way. Also, try to use a conversational style in your lecture captures, as you'll come off sounding way less scripted if you do so. Always make sure to speak clearly and, as mentioned before, concisely. Make all of your words count. You want to make your content relatable to all of your learners. You know, the old adage, what isn't it for me? What isn't it for your learners? One of the best ways to keep your learners engaged in your content is to clearly explain the material you're teaching them and showing them how that's beneficial to them. So take a practical or pragmatic approach and watch how much more engaged your learners will actually become that way. Lastly, you want to make your lecture captures engaging by using them as a jump-off point for activities you want your students to accomplish in your class. This turns your lecture capture into an active learning session. And we'll take a look now at a few active learning strategies that you can employ. For starters, you could integrate questions throughout your lecture capture. There are tools out there such as Kaltura Personal Capture, which Walker mentioned before, and also PlayPosit, which allow you to add question prompts to your lectures. These can range from a variety of question types, including multiple choice, true, false, short answer, and even open-ended questioning. After viewing your lecture capture, you should also have your students apply the material to either a follow-up assignment of some sort, whether that be a case study or some type of real-world application that really impacts them. And this really shifts the focus of the lecture from more of a passive viewing experience to having your learners think about how it can be applied within situational contexts. You could even consider assigning group work activities or perhaps even hold group discussions after the lecture where you can go over difficult concepts or to clarify some of the muddiest points within the lecture. Oh, I think I skipped one. Next, you also want to always consider accessibility in academic video content. And I know my colleague Natalia Koreva, who has joined the session today, is smiling right now. It's important to always ensure that academic videos that you create meet current accessibility laws and standards. In 2017, Section 508 of the Federal Rehabilitation Act of 1973 was actually revised to require that public institutions like Rutgers University comply with specific web content accessibility guidelines, including accurate captioning of academic video content. Any academic video you should create should really include accurate captioning. Captions should complement and align with what is being showed and demonstrated within the video. The experience for learners should be as descriptive and equivalent as listening to the audio. There's a few options out there for helping you with the process of adding captions to your academic videos. Here at Rutgers, for example, videos created and uploaded using Kaltura Personal Capture are automatically captioned with Cielo24, which is an auto captioning service provider. There are also several other auto captioning services out there available, including Rev and 3Play Media, for example. As Walker also mentioned earlier, when you begin developing your lecture captures, you should really start out by developing your script and your storyboard. Another captioning option is to convert these scripts that you create or your developed transcripts to captions by using YouTube. And obviously there's plenty of tutorials out there on how you can do this online as well. Also, text transcripts of your lecture should also be included within your lecture captures. In a hybrid or online course, text transcripts should be attached as a PDF file after the video. This way, learners then have the ability to download and take your lecture content on the go, or to read a text version at their own leisure. Audio descriptions within your captioning is another important accessibility consideration as well. Say, for example, you have a musical introduction or an interlude, or if you're conducting a demonstration of some type where visual and audio cues are important for your learners to understand. Let's say, for example, you're a chemistry professor and you wanted to show a video demonstration of how to mix a chemical compound, and throughout the demonstration, the chemicals fizz, and perhaps the chemical composition might change colors. You want to be able to describe these changes within your captions for those who might not be able to see or hear these things from your video. Additionally, extended audio description should also be considered. So say, for example, if there are long pauses within your video, you want to ensure that these captions also indicate that pause, so all of your learners understand that this is part of the video and not a technical issue on their end. You can learn much more about captioning and lecture captures by going to the World Wide Web Consortium website at www.w3.org, or also Quality Matters, a nationally recognized faculty-driven peer-review resource at www.qualitymatters.org. And by taking a look at their accessibility information that they have there. Let me actually just drop those links in the chat box as well so you guys can have those.
I got you.
You got me? Cool.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Walker. So I'll move along. Another thing I'd like to talk about today is universal design in lecture capture. And universal design, or UDL, really expands accessibility to focus broadly on learning preferences rather than just merely learning disabilities. The key areas of focus in UDL are providing our learners with multiple ways in which they can express their learning. But as instructors, it also means that we need to consider multiple ways to engage our learners, and creating video lecture captures is one way of accomplishing this from the standard face-to-face lecture format. So if you teach face-to-face classes after the pandemic, perhaps consider recording your lectures going forward as well, so students can go back and rewatch them and perhaps pick up on some things that they might have missed while sitting in class. The key takeaway here, though, is to create equivalent alternatives for our learners which align with the learner preferences while also being useful to everybody. And just in wrapping up, here are a few other considerations and reminders. Remember that practice makes perfect. The more you prepare before you get in front of the camera, the easier it's going to be once you hit the record button. And just know from experience that being in front of the camera does become much easier over time. You also want to make sure that you speak clearly and that you're not speaking too fast. Make sure to focus on those key points that you want your audience to have for their takeaways. You also want to make sure that you're making eye contact with the camera. And one tip for students in my academic video production class in a past session was to take a picture of a friend or say a loved one slightly above your camera and maybe pretend that you're having actually a conversation with that person. And this will make it appear that you're having a conversation with your students when you're also recording your video lectures as well. As we discussed in the last section, you also want to make sure considering a variety of learners in your class and the different learning preferences that they may have. And lastly, remember to smile and have a good time. Creating academic videos such as these, they should be fun. And the more you do it, the more that you'll enjoy creating. So that about wraps up our lecture for today. Thank you all very much. On behalf of Walker and myself, we hope you enjoyed our presentation.